Okay, we're live. Am I started? Okay. Welcome everyone to the September meeting of the Sustainable Environmental Advisory Commission. I wanted to thank everybody who came out tonight and those of you who are out in watching on YouTube, and for the interest that you're showing by showing up or by taking the time to watch this meeting tonight or whenever you are watching this in the future. I also wanted to thank the members of the Environmental Sustainability Plan team for all the hours you put in over the summer to get us to where we are today. For those of you who are here or out there from the community, your interest and commitment to real sustainability is what will keep this work moving forward. Community buy-in and community pressure as needed is crucial to ensure that this plan is implemented and that these goals become a reality. As the plan says, implementation is for everyone. So again, thank you for coming out, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say tonight and as this process finishes out. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Max, who will talk about the timeline for the plan.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Max Slankert. I'm Director of Public Works for the Village of Skokie. To echo Jenny's comments, I'd like to thank everybody who's tuned in this evening to join us as we review the initial draft of the sustainability plan for the Village of Skokie. And again, echo Jenny's comments and thanks and appreciation to everybody who was involved in this planning effort. It was quite an intensive effort on the behalf of all the members of the planning team across village staff and members of village boards and commissions and a number of community groups and other agencies in Skokie. So thanks everybody for their time and their effort in this. I just want to review very quickly the timeline for the plan review process as it moves forward. And I know our consultant, who will be the next speaker, Ted Redmond, will review some of this perhaps in a little bit more detail, but just so to give everybody a brief understanding of the process. Right now, after the presentation this evening, the review of the draft plan will continue with members of the ESP team, which is the Environmental Sustainability Planning team, through the end of the day on Monday, October 17th. Now, as well, the public review of the draft plan is underway as well, and Ted will discuss the links that are available for members of the public to access that plan and to make their comments, which is you can find at the Village of Skokie's homepage. But again, Ted will review that. And so the public comment period for that goes through the end of the day on Monday, October 17th as well. Following the conclusion of this comment period, the ESP team will meet again that following week to review comments made and submitted, and will prepare the final draft of the plan. From that point, the plan will be presented to the village board. And I skipped one critical thing. Let me backtrack for a second. After our presentation this evening, there will be a community listening session next Thursday evening, September the 29th at 7 p.m. That will be an interactive session, which will be hosted via Zoom, or there will be a Zoom opportunity. So those who are interested, Liz, correct me, people can sign up for that, and we will then make the Zoom link available shortly before the meeting so that we prevent having the Zoom link out there for too long and being Zoom bombed, or whatever that expression is, too far in advance. But that will be a public listening session where we will receive additional public comments. So I apologize for skipping that step in the process. In an in-person option as well. So that will be hosted here at Village Hall in the council chambers next Thursday, the 29th at 7 p.m. So Following the public comment period, then preparation of the final plan, and then that plan will be presented to the village board at a specially scheduled non-regular village board meeting, which will be on Monday, November the 14th. And so the presentation of this plan will be the agenda item for the village board that evening, along with, for members of the commission, the presentation of the waste recommendation on behalf of the Environmental Commission. Following that presentation at the November 14th village board meeting, the village board then will consider the sustainability plan again at their regular board meeting on Monday, November the 21st. So that is the plan for consideration of the sustainability plan. So if there are no questions or comments on that as a process, and again, Ted will probably review some of those action steps as well. But if not, I would turn the floor over to Mr. Ted Redmond, who's our principal consultant and guider from Pale Blue Dot, to take it away and walk us through the plan.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. And I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm glad to be here at least digitally. Let me get my screen functioning properly here. So hopefully this is showing up for everybody. Are you seeing this first slide? I'll take that as we're doing okay. Okay. So I wanted to just give you an overview of kind of a high-level overview of the plan, kind of the goals and strategies in the plan, and what the projected outcomes or impacts are related to the plan, a successful implementation of those strategies, and then kind of wrap up with a kind of a reaffirmation of how folks can review and provide comments and input on the plan. So that was my goal, and of course to take any questions that come up. So just as a brief kind of introduction, I am Ted Redmond. I am a partner with Pale Blue Dot. We are a sustainability, climate action, and renewable energy planning firm. We do climate action plans, sustainability plans, and renewable energy plans, largely at the community scale, and we kind of work all over the country. We are stationed out of St. Paul, Minnesota, but we do work all over the place. In the Chicagoland area, we recently completed the Northbrook Plan, and of course, we're excited to be working with Skokie, and we're also working with Kane County on their plan as well. But enough of me. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about the plan here. So I first want to share with you that at the beginning of the process, we created a lot of foundational documents. We do this in pretty much all of our planning efforts if we are able to. We believe that trying to generate as much data as we can reasonably create is important, just to kind of give our planning teams and ourselves a better sense as to what are the opportunities, what are the issues. So we created a climate vulnerability assessment. We took the village's greenhouse gas inventory that was completed by another entity, and we did a greenhouse gas emissions forecast, sort of projecting into the future. If we don't do anything, where might that be? We did a ground cover, tree canopy, heat island assessment, and we also did a renewable energy potential study. And all of those efforts were done kind of before we started the actual planning process. And again, the intent there was to just create as much information as we can, give ourselves a grounding on, well, out of all of this, where might we want to aim? All of that then got summarized into the sustainability baseline assessment with some strategic goal recommendations. And again, that was a sort of a starting place for the team that we worked with. And our intent was just to give folks a place to start so that they could begin debating and discussing what they felt was appropriate for Skokie, how did they want to change that, which things did they think were a good goal, et cetera. So all of that was the foundation for the planning effort. So with that, just sort of overviewing a little bit about our challenge from a sustainability perspective. Of course, Skokie has a long and proud history of sustainability action, has been doing sustainability initiatives for 30 plus years, 36, 37 years or more. But as we look forward in terms of what can this plan do, what should this plan be focusing on, some of the challenges that maybe we can foresee into the future can be summarized pretty well by simply looking at some of the climate change impacts, as that sort of touches multiple areas of sustainability. So as we look into the future, by the middle of the century, which is kind of coming up closer than we think maybe in some ways, we can expect the temperature in Skokie to be on average 4 to 5 degrees warmer throughout the year on average. We can expect 15 to 20 more days of temperatures over 95. We can expect then those to translate into an increase of air conditioning demand by about another 69, 70% of air conditioning demand. We can expect another 15% increase in average annual rainfall, or up to, I should say. And very importantly, we can expect that the rainfall is going to come in heavier events, probably another 30% increase, which is similar to the last 30-year range. We've seen about that same kind of increase over the last 30 years. And of course, our growing season is going to be about 20 days longer by the middle of the century here. And that sounds great when I'm thinking about tomatoes. It sounds a little less great when I'm thinking about allergies from pollen and so forth, and mosquitoes and ticks and other, as we call, vectors for vector-borne diseases. When we think about those things, the other sort of flip side is kind of how folks perceive those issues and their concerns. We did a sustainability survey at the beginning of the effort that was out for, I think, a couple of months. Skokie had a significant response rate. A lot of folks responded. I think we had over 850 responses, if I'm remembering. I could be a little off on that number, but we cleared 800. And so folks in that survey, a significant majority, over 90% of the respondents, were moderately, very, or extremely concerned about the potential impacts of climate change. The moderate, by the way, was the smaller of those three categories. And then we asked about folks being observing, as well as whether or not they've been impacted by impacts of climate change already. And 88% of the respondents indicated that they had been personally impacted by some of the effects of climate change. So this illustrates that this is an area for us to be able to work on. When we think about climate change, one aspect to consider is our greenhouse gas emissions. From a sustainability standpoint, this also is a great sort of indicator to go by, because our greenhouse gas emissions relates to energy consumption and other considerations that go beyond pollution, for instance, that go beyond climate change specifically. So it's a great sort of bellwether to guide us in terms of where we may want to make changes and how are we doing on those changes. For 2020, the total greenhouse gas emissions were over 726,000 metric tons. This shows the sort of breakdown of our emissions community-wide. About 60% in our building and energy sector, and about 35% in our transportation sector, and then just a hair under 5% for waste management, and then the small balance there within our water and wastewater sector. So our opportunity, based on not only on those findings, but the rest of these sort of foundational documents, as we look forward, kind of where can we go and how can we, what sort of goals can we create for ourselves? The carbon reduction goal, which is in the plan, the draft plan as presented, is to reduce community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 35% below 2020 levels by 2030. And then continuing on to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And so here on the sidebar here, you can see just sort of a comparison against the other regional communities. You know, it's not that we need to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, but I think it's always beneficial to just sort of see that, you know, other communities that have similar plans have goals that are not dissimilar. So it means that we're not kind of out in left field here with these goals. And I think just looking through what we're seeing in the region, you'll see that we're in good company. Kind of the pathway that our plan describes then, the strategies that I'll show you in a moment, by successfully achieving the strategies in the plan, we can project out that from our business as usual emissions, which is that top line of that sort of shaded area, that top line is where our emissions would be if we don't do anything. That dark blue line that drops down, that is the path of our emissions should we be able to successfully implement the strategies of the plan. And you'll see that then by 2030, through a successful implementation, our emissions would be down below 470,000 metric tons, which is a 35%, a tidge over 35% reduction from 2020. So the plan itself, first I'd like to share a little bit about the process to date. The working effort here is a total planning timeframe of about 8 months. This includes the process that we're in right now. We've to date had input from 850 community members, and we're hoping to receive more as now that we have a draft plan out there. And we've had an incredible, significant, very deeply involved effort by a team of 33 folks that include community member volunteers, as well as village staff. So it's been a lot of robust conversations and work effort between meetings from folks. So it's really a significant collaborative effort. As indicated, the planning process was based on 5 foundational documents, and we're in the process doing 2 community online surveys. So we did one in the future. The second one is one that we've got open right now. The plan that results from all of this has a total of 9 sectors, as we call them, and those sectors are identified here. So looking community-wide at sort of all of the aspects of our life, kind of breaking them into different sectors. Combined, all of those sectors have a total of 43 strategies that then are supported by 189 detailed actions. And it's expected to be implemented over an 8-year implementation timeframe, so through 2030. So a little bit about strategies. When I talk about strategies, a strategic goal, as I sometimes call them, is kind of a statement of an endpoint. So it's a kind of a goal statement. What do we want to achieve by that end date? So good example of it would be decrease community-wide VMT, which is vehicle miles traveled, by 5% by 2030 through increased biking, walking, shared mobility, and e-mobility. So that's an example of a strategy or strategic goal statement. So we've got 43 of those throughout the plan in the 9 sectors. And then when we talk about having detailed actions, these are sort of kind of a menu of actions, if you will, where on an annual basis, as the village continues to roll out the implementation, they will select from these menu of actions to target implementation or continued implementation of those actions through sort of a phased process on kind of an annual basis. And so they become very detailed statements that provide guidance on a specific program or a specific policy or a specific effort that can be done to support and advance those strategic goals. So that's kind of how the plan is put together. So with that, what I'd like to do is just kind of share with you a high-level overview of what is in each of the sectors, or at least the goals, I should say, and the strategies of each of the sectors. Due to time, we won't go through all of the actions, of course, that would take too much time. But I want to give you a good sense of what each sector is trying to do. So the first sector is transportation and mobility. The sector goals. So actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with the strategies and then we'll end up on the sector goals. So the strategies included in here, the strategic goals included in here are decreasing community-wide vehicle miles traveled, increasing public transit access and commuter ridership, increasing battery electric vehicle utilization. These are community-wide. Establishing viable renewable diesel and or biodiesel sources and achieving consumption replacement with those sources. And in case you don't know, renewable diesel would be generating liquid fuel through use of renewable energy sources through sort of a reverse fuel cell technology. So that's what we're talking about with renewable diesel. Increasing utilization of work from home for Skokie workers, reducing village-wide off-road and lawn equipment emissions, and achieving a 20% conversion of municipal operation gasoline vehicles by 2030, and then aiming towards 100% fleet conversion by 2040. So out of those strategic goals, kind of the goals, the sector goals that we might kind of steer by that will help us know that we're tracking. The major ones are our greenhouse gas emissions. So in this sector, we want to go from 257,000 metric tons to 177,000 metric tons by 2030. We want our vehicle miles traveled to go from 506 million to 481 million. We want our commuters using public transit to go from 8.9 to 11%. And we want our battery electric vehicles to go from 174 registered vehicles today, well, or at least at the beginning of the year, to over 8,000 by 2030. And of course, by saying that, we want to see that replacing gas vehicles. The next sector is the land use and housing. There are 3 strategic goals here. The first is to consider increasing average population per developed acre by 10%. So that would mean going from right now using our developed land as a guidance, looking at the total developed land against our total population. We've got about 10.6 residents per acre of developed land. In the future, we want to see that go to 11.7. And by the way, if we take the projected growth for Skokie and say we're going to keep it within developed land, we're not going to try to eke out of any other public green space, that achieves that goal. The second strategic goal is to reduce the share of population living in high energy poverty from 15.4% of the population down to 10%. And last, we want to update community plans, zoning, and design standards to increase housing and community resilience to the impacts of climate change. So you can see the sector kind of the metrics down below that we can steer by. Acres of developed land, we don't want to see that increase. Meanwhile, our density of people per acre, we want to see that increase. And if the population grows as projected, if we can keep our developed land the same, we should be coming out with that. And then the drop in the household poverty rate, energy poverty rate, I should say. This third sector is buildings and energy. We have a number of strategic goals here. The first is to improve total community-wide energy efficiency by 15%. So that means we want to see a 15% reduction in how much energy we're consuming in our building sector. We want to see the increase of adoption of high-performance building construction technology, aiming at achieving 1% net zero households and commercial properties community-wide by 2030. I should say 0.5%. I think I said 1%. We want to achieve a 5% fuel switching from on-site fossil fuel consumption to electrification by 2030. We want to increase on-site renewable energy from 0.12% to 2% of our building sector by 2030. We want to increase our residential and commercial green electricity purchasing village-wide to 15% of the energy purchases. And we want to see an increase in resilience, increase the resilience of community-wide building stock. We want to improve the total municipal energy efficiency by 15%. So this is for municipal buildings, the buildings that the village directly owns and operates. Within those same buildings, we want to see a 15% fuel switching from on-site fossil fuel to electrification or other no emission heating systems. And lastly, we want to increase on-site renewable energy of our municipal buildings to 7.5% of energy consumption. The sort of metrics that we can steer by, the sector goals at the bottom there are emissions. We want to see this sector's emissions drop from 431,000 to 336,000 metric tons. We want to see the increase in renewable energy combined for both on-site and purchased, going from 0.2% to 20%. We want to see our electricity consumption go from 441 million kilowatt hours annually to 400 million kilowatt hours annually. And we want to see a decrease in our natural gas consumption from 38 million therms to 30 million therms. These are community-wide numbers. Our fourth sector is waste management. We've got 5 strategies there. The first is decreasing landfill waste by 10%. So just how much is ending up in the landfill in general. We want to increase the number of commercial properties and condos that recycle. We want to increase the organics diversion rate. And this is a very important one. Organics is the heaviest hitting GHG emission of all of our waste sectors. So everything we can do to divert organics out of landfill and into organics recycling or composting and other strategies like that, it's very important. So we want to see an increase in the organics diversion from 2.4% of total solid waste to 8% of total solid waste. That isn't, by the way, 8% of the organics. That would be a large share of what we believe is currently being put into the waste management cycle that is organics. So we're talking 8% of the total waste volume. And we want to increase landfill diversion of recyclable materials by 10%. And we want to increase diversion of potential recoverable, so and hazardous materials and things like construction demolition waste by 25%. So the metrics there below that we can guide by: the greenhouse gas emissions, we want to see drop from 35,000 metric tons to 19,000 metric tons. We want to see the solid waste sent to the landfill drop from 18.5 thousand down to 16,500 or so. We want to see organics diversion go from 581 tons to 2,000 tons. And we want to see recycling diversion go from 4,900 to 5,500. The water and wastewater sector is our next sector. We've got 3 strategic goals there. We want to promote increased water conservation village-wide, and we want to see a reduction in water consumption consequently of 7.5%. So that's over, it's almost 200 million gallons conserved annually by 2030 is what we're aiming for. We want to update design standards and implement plans to meet projected climate change, stormwater, and flood mitigation requirements. And we want to educate, engage, and empower the public on water quality and conservation efforts. So the sector goals that we can steer by here, total water consumed, we want to see that go from 2.7 to 2.5, and wastewater generated from about 2.6 to about 2.4 billion gallons annually. And I should point out, these numbers are also anticipating growth. So Skokie is projected to grow in population. So that gives us a sense that we're looking for per capita reduction as well as accommodating for growth. And that's true for each of these sector goals. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. The next sector is local food and agriculture. We've got 3 strategies here, strategic goals. The first is to increase the availability and resilience of locally produced food. We want to increase access to locally produced food, particularly though that which can serve low income and food insecure individuals in the community. And we want to reduce food waste and hunger, achieving a 50% reduction in food insecurity community-wide by 2030. Our green space and tree sector is next. We've got 5 strategic goals there. Increased tree cover, particularly in priority neighborhoods. And those priority neighborhoods would be areas that have low tree cover right now, high heat island impact considerations, higher vulnerable population considerations, those sorts of things. If you're interested in that, you can look at our ground cover study that kind of helps target in what that might look like. We want to see an increase in those priority neighborhoods, going from a community-wide average of 25.5 to a community-wide average of 28% tree canopy cover by 2030, and a community-wide average of 31% by 2040. We want to replace 8% of our turf community-wide, so maintained lawns that are getting mowed. See that being replaced with alternative natives or other plants, or reduced maintenance cycles that benefit pollinators and increase stormwater benefits. So we want to see an 8% shift by 2030. We want to reduce the heat island effect through the community-wide dark impervious surface coverage. Again, particularly in neighborhoods identified with higher heat island impacts. By 5%, so reduction in dark impervious surfaces by 5%, which would take us from a community-wide average of 28.5% to a community-wide average of 23.5, roughly 320 acres, changing from dark impervious to something that is not dark impervious surface. And an decrease by 15% by 2040. We want to see an increase, we want to increase climate, flooding, and extreme heat resilience, and the biodiversity supportiveness of the village's park and open space. And we want to increase connectivity, accessibility, and equity of the village's parks and open spaces. Some of the metrics that we can steer by related to these goals are community-wide tree cover, going from 1,600 acres of community-wide tree cover to almost 1,800 acres covered by 2030. See a decrease of sort of mowed lawns, the turf areas, from almost 1,400 acres down to about 1,260 acres, and a decrease in dark impervious surfaces. So think, asphalt roofs, asphalt pavement, etc. I see a decrease in that from 1,830 to 1,500 acres. The next category is the health and safety section. We've got 4 strategic goals here. The first is to assist the village's air quality, extreme heat and cold, flooding and power infrastructure failure vulnerable populations in preparing for and mitigating climate change impacts. We want to educate, engage, and empower the public on health safety risks. We want to evaluate that the city's mission critical emergency services and other healthcare facilities are prepared for impacts of climate change. And we want to strengthen community response capacity and social support networks for those same vulnerable populations. And then the last technical section is economy. And we've got 5 strategic goals for the economy section. We want to develop the economic potential related to sustainability and climate action. So some of the things we're talking about has opportunities for local spending on food, generation of local renewable energy, could mean local jobs, more transit jobs, etc. So we want to do what we can to develop that potential. We want to improve the access to training related to sustainable economy to help build that workforce equitably. We want to develop and implement an education plan to support businesses to be more resilient so that they can also kind of be preparing for impacts that may impact their supply chains or their businesses. And we want to promote sustainable businesses who are either Green America or B Corp certified. So help encourage and incentivize local businesses to do so. And lastly, we want to establish sustainable financing for the village's sustainability efforts. At the end of all of these sections, we have one last section, which we call implementation. The implementation section has what we call cross-cutting actions. So cross-cutting actions are foundational recommendations that apply to multiple sectors or perhaps all sectors. And so these are in large part sort of recommendations for how the village might want to approach implementing the plan or helping to organize some of those issues. So the three sort of strategic areas that we have specifically for that, the first are actions which help continue to build internal capacity and support for the environmental sustainability plan implementation. The second is facilitating external support needing for environmental sustainability plan implementation. As we say, implementation is for everyone. This is a community-wide plan. So it's important for us to recognize that, you know, some poor one person at the village can't do all of this. We need all of the departments to be aware of and participating in this. And even with that, with all of the departments working on it, the village of Skokie as an entity by itself can't do it all by itself, because of course this is community-wide. So we need participation and awareness and engagement by as many folks as we can get, residents, businesses, folks that just frequent Skokie. Everybody can participate in some way. So those two strategic goals are about helping to pave that way. And then the last strategic goal within the cross-cutting is maintaining appropriate funding to support the plan implementation. So a few actions around exploring and supporting developing that opportunity. So through the successful implementation of all of those strategic goals that I mentioned, and the menu of detailed actions that can be implemented through annual implementation plans, we can model the projected impacts of those. And so the first chart on the far left there, you see is what we call a wedge diagram. So at the top of the wedge diagram, you'll see, you know, the line kind of drops a little bit. That top line is where our emissions will be through 2030 if we don't necessarily do anything differently than what we're doing. You'll see that it drops. It does come down. We are expecting our electric grid to continue to clean up a bit over the years. We're expecting our impacts by vehicles to drop just a bit. We're expecting vehicle mileage, by the way, if you don't do anything, we think it's going to go up. But our mile MPG ratings keep going up a little bit. We are expecting some folks to do EVs, even if we don't encourage it. So with those sorts of things, we do expect our emissions to drop a bit, but not enough. You can see our goal is down at the bottom there, the bottom line, that dashed line. We want to hit down below 470,000 metric tons by 2030. So those blue wedges, the different shades of blue, kind of show the share of reduction that our building sector at the bottom, the darker blue, our transportation sector, which is that mid-colored blue, and our recycling, which is the lighter colored blue that you can see. Those are the share of contributions that they all make. The water sector is in there. It's just the water sector is a very small portion of the village of Skokie's footprint that you can't quite see in the diagram. And then that donut just simply shares that same information in a different way that says by 2030, successful implementation of the plan, by achieving that greenhouse gas reductions, the share of reduction is about 41% buildings and energy, about 53% out of the transportation sector, and about 5% out of our waste, and about 1% out of our wastewater sector. Now, all of those, you'll recall that a lot of those strategic goals talk about reducing certain things, reducing energy consumption, increasing miles driven by electric vehicles, decreasing total vehicle miles driven, etc. So we can also model community-wide costs and cost savings of those categories. In the report, there's an appendix that kind of goes through the calculation reasonings and the different resources for certain values that we can use to project some of those. But you can see that cumulatively, so in other words, if I make an energy efficiency reduction next year, if I increase my insulation or something, say in my house, and I can reduce my consumption by 10% because I've done some improvements, we're assuming that once I do those improvements, if I can reduce my energy consumption by 10%, that 10% gets to repeat each year. So I'm hopefully not, knocking a hole in my wall to undo what I just did. But so we can calculate cumulatively as we project year by year increases. These are the cumulative savings and costs. You'll see that there are negative numbers in there, which are costs, and the positive numbers, which are savings for a total economic potential in the transportation sector, the buildings and energy sector, waste reduction. By reducing or eliminating food waste, we are reducing or eliminating wasted money on food, for instance, as an example. And we also have the value of the avoided carbon. So there's a cost of carbon. For Skokie, we're estimating at about $135 per metric ton. That's kind of in the middle of what you see. Typically, different sources will estimate value of carbon at different numbers. I usually see it anywhere from 50 to as much as 300. So at 135, we're somewhere in the middle there. But by avoiding carbon emissions, we are avoiding contributing to long-term impacts that will come back to haunt us all. So everything we can do to reduce our emissions, we're avoiding some social costs of that. So we're accounting for that also. So those numbers are all just sort of cumulative potential savings, just to kind of help us understand that by doing these things, we are actually, this is very beneficial in multiple ways beyond the sustainability opportunities that are very important. So with that, thank you so much. I'm very happy to take questions or talk with you all. I just want to call out one thing though, which is that the draft environmental sustainability plan is out and available for everybody to review and comment on. You'll see down here at the bottom of the screen here is a link. It's pale blue dot period LLC / Skokie-ESP-review. So if you go to that link, you will be taken to a website that has this plan broken apart into each of its sections. So you can review any section you want to, or all of them, and provide feedback on any or all of the sections that you would like to. That QR code also will take you there. So with that, I'm happy to just receive questions and do anything I can to help answer whatever you have.
I have a question. First off, good evening, and thank you so much for this presentation. There's some really great information and action items included. My name is Emily, by the way. So, I think one of the tools of a plan like this also is to engage the public, right, and to educate, the public on, sort of the importance of these items and how we can work to mitigate the impacts of climate change. And I think from what I see, there's a couple things that seem to be missing, that could potentially work to educate. And one of those is that while it's true that we are going to have, that we are in a warming trend, and all those things are true, that our winters are getting shorter, we are still going to get these extreme weather events in the winter. And I think that that's something that, is largely ignored by a lot of people. And it's also used, when we do get those events in this region, it's used to say like, oh, see, like, it's not really happening, or like everything's fine, or whatever else. And those events also have a significant impact on our infrastructure. And so I know that it's a very small thing, but I'm hoping that you could include that somewhere in the impacts of climate change, just because I think that that will have a significant impact on, even if it's just for a few days in the winter, that is like a major thing. So that's one aspect, and then the other one that I always come back to is water. It's probably one of the most, even if we don't necessarily feel that here, water shortage throughout the world is one of the greatest impacts of climate change. And I'm hoping you can include a little bit of language in the water section, even though we live next to a major freshwater source, on our contribution to global water conservation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I totally echo what you're saying. And in fact, I'll expand just a tidge on the water thing. I mean, it is, we live in a water rich region. So it is actually kind of a battle for us always to help people understand that that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be thinking about water. I mean, just think that, I mean, we have communities in our water rich region that have had significant drinking water problems, and, extreme weather events, that can contribute to creating issues for our water sources. And we're going to have a change in precipitation and all that. So I completely agree with you. And I think those are great comments, and we can explore how we can increase that in the document there.
Can I say something, Ed?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Echoing Emily's concern about the water, one thing to keep in mind is while we have a great big lake, the aquifers underneath Northeast Illinois have been depleted significantly over the years. And and also Illinois is a big agricultural state. So we have a number of communities that are outside the Great Lakes watershed that are in the Chicago region. So I think that there is going to be a lot of pressure from other areas to tap into the lake. And we just need to be mindful of a diversion of water from the Great Lakes watershed. Also, the quality of the water in the lake, we need to be concerned about as well, because there's a number of agricultural impacts of water runoff. We've seen that in Lake Erie with the algae plumes, where the drinking water was threatened by algae plumes. So we do need to be mindful of making sure that we're managing our water responsibly, and that includes us here in Skokie as well. And I also I appreciate Emily also bringing up the impact of the extreme weather in the winter and the impact on infrastructure, because we will have these occasional deep freezes, which will have some adverse impacts on, particularly as Skokie ages as a community. Aging infrastructure could be a problem.
Thank you.
I have one other question, since if we have the opportunity. So we set the goal at 35%, reducing our carbon greenhouse gas emissions 35% from 2020 levels. And I was looking at the regional climate action plan, which talked about seemed to be a much more ambitious goal for 2030. I was involved in the process, but I don't recall how did we get to that 35% from 2020? What was the rationale of picking that as a goal?
So that's a good question, and the goal. So we started off with sort of, let's target something that we think we want to hit, and the target was based on kind of at least grounding it in IPCC recommendations to that their guidance is for avoiding 1.5 degree or a 2 degree increase. And so we grounded in there originally, and then the final draft here, the draft plan here, I should say, the 35%, which kind of got finalized through that process, is a reflection of original intent combined with where we are at with the various sub goals. So, if we, because we have a goal for so many electric vehicles, a goal for reduction of so many VMTs, a goal for so much energy consumption reduction, et cetera. And so in each of those sort of sub goals along the way, we're vetted out through, a number, as you know, a number of conversations, in-depth conversations with team members about, different action strategies, whether they feel good about this or not so good about that. And so when we're kind of all done with having those sub goals, we then remodel to come up with, well, based on those sub goals, where would our reductions end up? And that's how we kind of end up at 35%. And I would say, I usually also recommend that we should always be thinking about goals as targets today, but that doesn't mean that we can't surpass them. The flip side is also true. I mean, we can have super aggressive goals and then understand, well, it's, you can have a super aggressive goal, and if you don't hit it, at least, if you're making progress, good progress, that's still a good thing too. So, I mean, there's different philosophies in that. I tend to suggest aim for something that's robust, that you also feel is achievable when you look at all the parts and pieces. And then let's see what we can do to actually not only meet it, but let's see if we can, go a little bit beyond, discover that we've surpassed those goals. So you'll see that in the plan and the implementation section, we recommend that there's intermittent review of progress, and that things get adjusted as you do intermittent reviews. And of course, between now and 2030, there'll be, I promise, new things that'll come up, some new technology, some new trend that we can maybe capitalize on. So by doing sort of reviews at appropriate intervals, the village can decide, hey, at this goal, we can actually, let's push this further because progress is moving in a way that is even better than we thought it would. So that's also something to keep in mind.
Andrew?
Yeah, so I kind of have a little bit of a, I guess, mix of comments and questions. I kind of wrote some of them down so as not to be too terribly long-winded, and kind of pick some of them. Not to go over everything, right? Don't want to dominate, but yeah, I mean, I did think certain things in particular are important. I think the transportation and mobility thing, obviously, it's pretty clear that that's a significant source of emissions in the community, obviously. So, it's always a welcome thing, especially I get around with public transit mostly and walking. So I think there's definitely a need always to sort of improve conditions for bicyclists and for pedestrians. And also the whole, when it comes to increasing tree cover, green space, I think there's definitely a link between mental health and physical health and access to green space. And they've even, linked it to a reduction in crime, actually, some studies. So I think there is this bigger benefit that can be seen, aside from the obvious, the reduction in the heat island effect, as it says, and also the sustainable economy, the importance of, I think, stressing the opportunities where that's concerned, because so often I feel like there's been just this idea that you have to choose between the economy or the environment, and really there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, I think, where they kind of can intersect. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So, but what I was kind of curious about a little bit, because I'm not sure that we talked about it as a group all that much as it relates to the plan. I know that there is a mention of locally produced food. So I was wondering if there's any ability to expand on that, because I'm always vegetarian personally, I'm always looking for organic and wherever possible, local and or regionally grown food, because that reduces the number of miles spent in transit, obviously, for those products. So I was wondering kind of if there's any ability to expand on that aspect of it.
And when you say expand on, in terms of expand on why it's in there, or?
Oh, no, I was just wondering, because you talked about, let me see, I wrote down well, I guess we can discuss it in the future too. But yeah, no, I thought that's important that it addresses sort of I believe it also addresses the, access to that sort of things. I thought that's kind of important.
Exactly. Yeah. And, from a broad sustainability perspective, I mean, it's the strategy of working on trying to create local food generation and distribution opportunities is important on multiple levels from sustainability perspective. First is, if we can convert, some dark space, a rooftop garden, just envision that, if right now it might be contributing to heat island, tomorrow it could be contributing to local food, as an example. So there's environmental benefits that can be had. There's also resilience considerations. Climate change impacts. We've had a few instances where, a great example, we did a climate action plan for a South Minnesota community. They have Jenny-O turkey there, and while we were doing the study, actually, we had an extreme weather event, winter weather event, knocked out their supply chain because the turkey farms were being hit, and then the roads between them were being hit, and their production dropped off. This is just a tiny example of, it wouldn't take much to have a few things like that overlap, where suddenly supply chains are at risk to the point where it's not that everybody's going to starve, but it is that food prices could suddenly go through the roof. And so our food insecure individuals could be at risk. So increasing local food is a resilience strategy. And of course, there's all sorts of health benefits associated with that too. So
yeah, I actually just found my handwriting is pretty bad at the best of times. So I was trying to read my own chicken scratch here. But yeah, I was wondering if there was any, I don't know if we talked about it much as a commission. So I was just kind of wondering whether there is any, whether as a sort of group, subcommittee, the planning committee, whether there was any discussion specifically of where in the community might be the most viable or feasible to do something like that.
Yeah, related to this plan, we don't have specific locations that we're calling out, but more along the lines of actions to achieve that. Let's go collaborate with the school district or other entities to identify potentials, both physically and then also just from a programmatic standpoint. How can we move these things along? So I would say across the board, this is a guidance plan document, not a design document, so to speak, where we're maybe pointing out like this piece of land or this property is available or a good potential for that. That would be kind of that would be an implementation step.
Yeah, right. I guess that would be more prescriptive than this would be, but.
Exactly, yeah.
So I have a couple other comments. I guess, one of the things that I'm sensitive to is how we are setting up the community and particularly village staff, for success. Like if we're actually creating items that are going to be achievable. And so, and Max, this might be a question for you, and Liz, but a couple things that sort of jumped out to me is, if I understood correctly, 100% of fleet operations would be electric by 2040, full gasoline. I mean, is that actually achievable in the sense that, like, are all vehicles, is it like, my question is twofold. Like, is it actually reasonable for for every single one of these fleet vehicles that are gasoline to be electric? And then also, is that a realistic timeline given the cycle of vehicle replacement?
Well, I think you have to bear in mind Ted's comment, which was, as we sit here today, no, right?
Right.
Because I can't go buy an electric fire truck right now
Yeah.
unless we go to one manufacturer who's produced 2 of them that exist in the United States. But right. So, but the thing is to bear in mind is some of these goals are aspirational.
Yeah.
And this plan will take place over a period of years. And this plan looks at 2030. That goal in particular is measured through 2040. And so
Right.
we know that technology will change, and in that area likely change quickly. So as we sit here today, I would say the fire truck that I will buy tomorrow will be here for 15 to 20 years. But the technology may change within 5 years' time, that all of a sudden the ability to create that electric fire truck totally transforms. So the reality may be that by, I don't know the right year to tell you, by
Sure.
2030 or 2035, there may be all sorts of electric fire trucks out there. So,
But
it may be possible.
And I
So,
fully appreciate that, and I mean, I can understand that, right? But I wonder if putting this out there is creating a perception that it is possible. And, and we've talked about electric vehicles too, in the sense that, sorry, we've talked about electric vehicles too, in the sense that, we know that currently it wouldn't work for your operations due to, things like battery limitations and things like that, and it may sort of never be possible. And I guess my question is a question of perception and what we're putting out there and what the public is going to see and how they're going to perceive, how they're going to come back in 2030 and say, hey, but you said in writing that this is something you were going to do, but actually knowing that, okay, well, there are limitations.
And if I may, I just want to throw out a clarification. That strategic goal relates to the village's gasoline fleet.
Right.
So that would be, cars or light duty truck kinds of things. It would not include heavy duty things like the fire truck or a dump truck or, something of that nature necessarily. That isn't to say that, in the conversation, I think everybody is definitely wanting to see the evolution across the board, but the strategic goal itself is explicitly on the gasoline portion.
Well, and then similarly, also the transportation goals to improve conditions for biking and pedestrian. If that includes I'm wondering if that includes any type of reworking of the corridors, of the street corridors. Like if that means that there's going to be changes to streets and changes to, and then just also looking at a timeline for 2030, it sort of comes back to the same thing, which is, is this an actual reasonable timeline? Because it's my understanding, that being able to change, like being able to improve pedestrian access or biking access might have a much sort of longer, it might take longer to do that. Just based on my capital improvement and access to, those opportunities.
yeah, I mean, I'm not recalling the specific action step or item that relates to that particular goal. The point is, I think that, the village has certain public improvements that it undertakes every year. And so it's about, incorporating those sorts of considerations into the public improvements process as we move forward, and then looking to advance those strategies when we can, where we can, and working towards, achieving those strategies. So, we have, certain bikeway projects that we have that are out there and that we're pursuing funding for, and that we're doing plan development for. And so as I look at those goals, I mean, to us, it's about, continuing to prioritize those sorts of projects and try and prioritize the funding for those projects to continue to try and, maximize that sort of transportation.
Okay. And sorry, I'm the last one. Nobody else has. If nobody else has any comments. Actually I have two more, but I'll start with one. In the section, Ted, where you talk about food insecurity, there is something that is there's something that's a little bit difficult for me because I feel like you include low income in the food insecurity comments. And I don't know that there's a lot about determining what is creating that food insecurity. And there's sort of an ingrained assumption that income levels, are part of that. And while, that seems to be a fair assumption, I'm also wondering if some sort of investment in understanding where the food insecurity comes from. And also, recognizing that it could be something other than, I don't know, it just feels like those terms are getting used interchangeably, and I'm a little bit sensitive to that. Like, it feels like it's maybe not completely, I want to use the word appropriate, but that seems like a really harsh word. So a lesser form of appropriate.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And, at this vantage point, we know the kinds of things that can contribute to food insecurity. What we don't know is the specific mixture, within Skokie. So the sorts of things that we do know can contribute to food insecurity. Certainly, revenue, income can be a part of that. If I don't have enough funding to be able to buy the food that is needed, that's clearly an insecurity, right? But it's not the only. There's also food insecurity related to, religious or ethnic considerations. The kinds of foods that I eat may not be available to me, or it could be access, that the places that have, a full service grocery store is inaccessible to me in a reasonable way because of its distance and maybe I don't have access to transportation in a way that can help me achieve that. So what we cannot say what mixture of potential insecurity drivers Skokie currently has. That takes a food insecurity assessment, a food security assessment, where there are groups that do those that can look at all sorts of things from, ethnic or religious food considerations, and what does that mean for the kinds of food that we want to make sure are available for folks in, as well as where is that food available geographically, where are people geographically, what kind of transportation considerations are there, as well as costs and income. So all of those things they can look at and could come up with a specific strategy then based on that. And they usually, what they'll do for those studies typically is they'll do lots of interviewing. They'll look at grocery stores for pricing and what products are available and what products are not available, and also do meetings and interview sessions with individuals from the community, hopefully targeting a broad range of folks from different demographic groups, and putting that all together to illustrate where our needs are and what we have and what are our gaps. So that is an action that could be done, to do a food security assessment, food insecurity assessment, to identify as specifically as possible the local Skokie drivers.
I mean, I think also just acknowledging in the language that, we don't want to exclude, or we don't want to appear to exclude, food insecurity that it is not driven by income. And I know that I did see that there are some portions that do include that, but I also think that food can be really emotional. And so, I don't know, it just feels a little bit off to have food insecurity so closely linked to income in this document. And then, sorry, one last comment, unless somebody else wants to provide comments. But in the sorry, I listed it as TM, which I think is like green space or transportation mobility. So yeah. Oh, right. So working with local landscapers and construction industry, and to encourage residents to hire contractors that are using electric machines. I wonder what impact that's going to have on smaller, more local businesses that might not be able to afford the conversion, especially in the timeline. And I wonder to what degree, that could negatively impact more, smaller businesses, basically, that might be more local.
That's a good point, good consideration.
Thank you.
And I had a couple of comments. To Emily's point about food insecurity and things. I think one of the things, and also to whether things can get done, I think there are a lot of strategies, speaking to things about achievability, I think there are a lot of strategies and tools that are currently available that Skokie doesn't use. And I think there are opportunities present now for Skokie to think about things differently and to do things differently that can move us significantly in the direction that we need to go towards the goals of this plan. And I think we need to be pretty aggressive about taking a look at that and seeing what's out there. What are some things that have been done in other communities, and also what are things that are emerging that Skokie can take advantage of that we currently do not do. And as far as the food insecurity thing, I echo your concern about tying it specifically to income. I think that there's a lot more that goes into food insecurity, not only the availability of food, but the quality of food. That could be an issue as well. The thing that we can expect also to happen over the next several years, and it's beginning to happen. I mean, we're seeing it happen now, is the conditions are going to change pretty dramatically. If you just look at the retail economy and generally, and in Skokie as well, it's, just in the last 10 years, it's pretty, we've seen an implosion of retail. Well, a similar kind of economic fallout could happen in other sectors. Who knows what impact that would have on the availability of goods and services. So I think we need to keep an eye out on that. And finally, I just wanted to say we talked at the meeting on Tuesday about metrics and regularly measuring, and also benchmarks towards these goals. And I think for an environment that is as dynamic as it is these days, with the change that's going on economically and also the potential disruptions. I mean, nobody anticipated the pandemic. That's been a major jolt to our systems. Similar thing could happen in 2 or 3 years that we can't even imagine what it is now. But I think it's really important that the village make a commitment to monitor this, to establish some benchmarks, some concrete actions that are going to be taken, and that we also commit the resources necessary to monitor our progress and to evaluate how we're doing, both in term, not to sort of make us feel bad if we don't achieve. I personally, my approach to things is that we accomplish more by falling short of ambitious goals than we do by meeting diminished expectations. I think we need to keep our goals ambitious so that we keep pushing ourselves, but at the same time, we need to be realistic about what are the things that are going to change, how are we going to track that, and how we're going to respond to both the challenges that come up with changing circumstances and also any opportunities that might come up.
Great, thank you. Those are great comments. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. One is I know you mentioned this on Tuesday, I can't remember what the answer was. On the column in each section where it lists out in the goals, and then underneath each goal, all the the ways to achieve those goals. On the right side is what phase those are in. When will that be put into the plan?
So our current intent is that we will explore sort of a suggested phasing here through between now and having the plan, the final draft for the board in November. So part of it is kind of letting the actions sort of settle in, get review comments and the like, and then as those start getting those comments, as we have a chance to integrate those to explore phasing. And the phasing, I'll say too, is intended to be, it's a starter point. You'll notice that we describe the phases relatively loosely. They overlap. And that is because, one, we recognize some actions this might take us a few years to even get it up and going. So that's one thing to consider. Whereas another action might be one and done. Hey, we can get that, we can get that up and going in 6 months or whatever. So actions have different pacing. The second thing is understanding that this document, because it's a multi-year plan stretching across 9 sectors, that as we talk about in the implementation section, what the rubber really hits the road when staff have the ability to create the annual plan, pulling out those actions that they're going to be focusing on this upcoming year that relates to budget and staffing and all of those sorts of things. We tend to suggest letting the phasing being a little bit soft, only because you'll never know what comes about where something that's a phase 3 really should suddenly, let's do it next year. We got a grant, there's a new grant opportunity, there's whatever funding became available, a partner has come out of the woodwork that wants to do something. Hey, it's a great opportunity for us to do that. You don't want to go willy-nilly without direction, but it's definitely important to provide some flexibility to move things around a bit. So that's just that's a long way of saying that the phasing is tended to be sort of a framework, but is not necessarily something that needs to be we don't need to be a slave to it. As opportunities come up, the village undoubtedly will shuffle those around a little bit to make sure that it fits into annual implementation well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, that does. And then I have one other question is in the food section, there's a lot of talk about increasing locally produced foods. In one way is more community gardens, but given that even with an increased growing season of 15 to 20 days, we've got 6-7 months of a growing season here, and that's with doing some, looking at different types of crops and taking some extra measures to extend that. Are there things that other municipalities or maybe on a slightly larger scale have done that in places where they can't grow things 12 months a year to still work on increasing locally produced foods that you're aware of?
Yeah, well, I can't right now think of something where it's explicitly municipal driven, but there are definitely examples of what can be done. For instance, like literally just a few blocks away from my office right here, there is an indoor garden. It's an organization, a company, they have a vertical farm. It's just a simple warehouse building. They have a series of vertical farms where they're growing spinach and lettuce, and I think they've now started with tomatoes, and they sell it in local grocery stores here. So the idea of looking for gardening or growing food year round, we do need to start looking at going indoors here in our northern climates where we get snow and cold weather, but we can go indoors. And so, as an example, if there's some underused, maybe there's a warehouse that's not fully used, or has been on the market forever and nobody seems to have an idea to it. Maybe there's an opportunity to collaborate with other partners and explore, issuing an RFP for a local indoor farm. I don't, just as an example. I'm not saying you need to do that, but just illustrating that understanding that that's a goal can also help us keep our eyes open for potential opportunities.
Can we include language in the plan that doesn't just focus on, at least the way it reads to me, is outdoor gardening? So that there's that seed for, we don't have big open lands here. I've seen in a lot of places in the north that, big greenhouses that grow things all year round, but those still tend to be in more rural areas and not, there's one that I'm thinking that I can think of, it's in Chicago, but usually I see them in rural areas, especially in Canada. But they're not in small, they're not in towns like Skokie. So if that's in the plan, maybe it would probably require a zoning change, but to have it in.
That's a great point. I don't know if we explicitly spell that out, and we might have an opportunity to get that easily integrated. So that's a great comment.
Thanks. Lisa?
Hi, Ted, I sent you a private message about some like editing things and some formatting things that I think could be tightened up and fixed. But also I was given access to the Adobe document, and I have started making a lot of comments on there. So, but one of the things, and I hope I can explain this, I think most of the commission members will know what I'm talking about. So the mayor and the trustees have been using this plan, sort of talking about this plan in that it's going to enable them to do all sorts of things. For example, with the example of Carvana coming in, they claim that there was nowhere that they could legally refuse them just to protect wildlife, because there was nothing they could legally point to that they could deny them their ability to build here because it was going to harm wildlife. And secondly, and similarly with Amazon coming in as like a distribution center, that was going to create a lot of pollution, having a lot of trucks and a lot more traffic and a lot more cars and a lot more emissions coming into our area, having it be a distribution center. And the mayor and the trustees publicly said, well, rejecting this kind of business just because it's going to create more pollution, we don't really have anything in our ordinances and things like that to deny them. And so it sounded like that they were sort of relying on this incoming plan to for it to have something in the plan that would give them permission or the legal ability, or give businesses a heads up when they come to Skokie wanting to have a business here, that, hey, we're going to evaluate you based on the amount of pollution that your business is going to create, whether you're going to have like just one more drive through here or another, warehouse distribution center with a lot of traffic, or you're going to do something that's really going to harm wildlife. So I'm wondering if there was a discussion among the plan members about this. And I was wondering if you can point to somewhere in the plan, I'm not completely through it, I haven't read the last few pages, but where the trustees and the mayor can point to this to show businesses by saying, you don't fit into our sustainability plan, you go against our sustainability plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've made a long way through the plan. I saw your comments, so thank you so much for that. And in those last couple pages you hadn't quite gotten to, under the cross-cutting strategies, the first one, which is the cross-cutting strategy, is to continue to build internal capacity and support. And then specifically action number, let me find it so I don't misquote. CC 1-5, so the 5th action number, is to establish and implement a policy to review existing and future Village of Skokie policy and ordinance changes and building and zoning variances and requests. Take anything that basically any village business that would require or would be expected to have commission action or board action, basically review those against the goals, strategies, and actions of the environmental sustainability plan to ensure alignment of changes with the plan. And even in addition to that, we can provide, we're happy to provide, actually, we have an example. Some communities, in fact, the city of Bloomington, Indiana, we did their plan 2 years ago now. We helped them create a little memo that can be used for anything that comes before the city council or their commissions for action. They put a little memo over it, and on the memo, as a part of the staff report, it would just have a box that you check. This is in line with the plan, and if so, please identify which goals it helps support, so we know. And if it has the potential of not being in line with the plan, please identify in what way may it be counter to our plan. And of course, and staff can't, they're not magicians, they can't see the future perfectly, but at least based on the information that we have right now, what can we reasonably assume helps align with or could be a challenge to the plan. So that's one thing that we've seen a lot of communities do, or some communities do, to make that action a reality.
Thank you. I know Charlie's been working on something like that. Aren't you, Charlie?
I did an initial run, and then Matt Brandmeier left and Carrie left. So I need to pick up that conversation again with Joanna. But having some sort of checklist or a tool that evaluates it sort of methodically would evaluate things that came before the village against the objectives of the plan. I think Lisa's point is well taken, though. I mean, some of this stuff was in the 2016 plan and was never done. And I think that we need to be more vigilant about maintaining the expectation that there's follow through on this, substantive follow through on this, and not just sort of, it's on the plan and then just have it never visited again. The Amazon and Carvana projects were two examples where the village was completely flat-footed. It was clear that there really hadn't been any really good work that was done to implement the plan or incorporate the plan into the project review process. So I think we're going to have to stay on top of it. My concern about those cross-cutting items is that, again, they're very general. They're sort of like almost a wish list. And I think I would like the plan to be a little more tangible in terms of, okay, these things will be done by this date, so that we can proceed, rather than have things keep getting deferred or finding some reason not to do them.
I didn't want to interrupt, but yeah, I mean, I know that there was discussion at past meetings, at least one, when it comes to kind of tracking progress and sort of having a dashboard that would be publicly accessible, to sort of see how far we've come and how far we have yet to go. And I agree that it is important to have all future development kind of align with our goals and objectives to align with this plan, rather than, advance things rather than to set things back. So I was wondering, is there any ability, I don't know if this is even something that's answerable right now, but would there be a way for that dashboard to include more specifics about all future development, so that the public can see sort of in one kind of convenient place, whether that is or is not sort of aligned with the goals and advancing sort of what we hope to achieve, if that makes sense.
Are you asking me?
You or yeah, I don't know what you. I guess it's an open-ended question, but yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was my original intent, and I'll pick that up again and see if Joanna is open to it and seeing what we can do. But I agree with you. There should be something very tangible that is, can be available to businesses, but also to help in the evaluation of projects and have some sort of to be accountable, so the public can look at that and say, okay, this is what's being considered and why.
Yeah, because I just thought that could potentially be a helpful tool. Like, and I think we'd kind of discussed this in the past as well, obviously. But.
Chad, I have another question, or another comment. In the health and safety section, I noticed that one thing that isn't represented is mental health. And I know that mental health that climate change does have a significant impact on mental health, and the stressors of climate change can have a significant impact on mental health. And I'm hoping that you can include that specifically, that, that there can be language around mental health specifically, just so that people who are experiencing mental health challenges feel, seen or heard or whatever it is.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great comment. Thank you.
I think that's it. Okay. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.
Just one more plug for the next week's public information, public session, and then also the you can comment and provide input anytime until October 17th.
Stop. Do you want me to stop sharing?
No,
Oh.
did you have a question before for Ted?
Oh, Ted, we did have a question in the audience just asking about the listening session. You're going to do an intro presentation similar to today, but my understanding it's going to be maybe just a little shorter. Maybe it'll be the same. I'm not sure. Okay.
Yeah, the slides are going to be the same. We'll move through it a little bit faster because we'll also, because it's a, slightly different meeting format. We'll also have, I'm thinking maybe printouts of kind of like all the nitty gritties of the plan on the walls. And so I'll move through a little bit faster to try to give people an opportunity to kind of move about the space, because I'm assuming that a lot of people won't have seen any of the plan yet. So we want to give them chances to see as much as they can.
Are you here in person for that meeting, or are you going to be on?
Yeah, I will be there in person.
I think that's it for this. Thanks for joining us tonight and sharing all this with us.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate being able to take up all of your time. Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
Great. Bye, everyone.
Next item on our agenda is public comment, which we have no members of the public anymore. So I guess we don't have public comment unless you have anything.
No.
Okay. One thing it's not on our agenda is adoption of the meeting minutes from last month's meeting.
Yes, that's a good point. We'll add in as other business.
Is there a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from July meeting was our last meeting. And the second, Rick, is it second? All those in favor of adopting the minutes? All right. Other business? Do we have any other business?
So, was anyone else at the backlot dash? I was volunteer, I was at the sustainability, helped recycling and stuff. At the composting, I helped there. I spent my time there. It was interesting. Even there was one with the bingo, it was by the bingo tent for a while. And they were throwing away the bingo cards with the thin, that you can compost those. And I learned a lot myself. That's what I did. So, it was good.
All right, our next meeting, next week, our next meeting is
Yeah.
There's still ESP meeting.
It's tentative, but we think we're pretty sure we're gonna meet, unless it's changed. We need a meeting to go over the public comments.
So
Can you repeat, can someone speaking into a microphone repeat what Jenny just said about the next meeting?
October 25th at 7 p.m. I was asking about the ESP team meeting. Is that what you're wondering? Or our meeting?
I can't make out what's being said.
Okay, let me try going up all the way. Is that better? Can you hear?
Well, Jenny has to speak.
Okay.
Our next meeting is October 25th.
Okay. October 25th at 7 p.m.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Well, I was just saying, I assume I can see and or hear a lot of people who are there, but I just want to make sure that Liz, you, I assume, are as per usual, whole attendance thing, because hybrid meeting, so I can't see.
Somebody wrote names down and I can't read it. Is that
That's because my
okay?
hand is like,
So yes, I'll get them over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, I just want to make sure because I know it's kind of can be busy. So
all right. There's a
Thank you, everybody.